Indian diaspora context and text. I can share some context, but if diaspora means away and sparing in so, I am really away from the text so far written. But I can share the diasporic event. The diaspora, what is mean foreign labor? Everybody knows the diaspora can come from that big event when the Jews left their fatherland and till today's event in this college. What will be on and about diaspora? In the global context, in tracking the history, Indians are so much aware of this subject. Diaspora as individual, diaspora as relative, and the diaspora is post-colonial. Tracing the history, you can captivate in three frames. What was it? That is colonial diaspora, pre-colonial diaspora, and post-colonial diaspora, 1960 onwards. If it is pre-colonial, you can start from the development of the Silk Road. When Indian maritime or Indian terrestrial philosophers, monks, mercantile and religious persons, those who traverse continent to continent and heal to Europe, that is very good. Pataliputra, Topuzla, Kasgod, Berham to China. And Indian diaspora dispersed there. That is pre-colonial situation. And even in pre-colonial situation, during Chola kingdom, South Indian greater ruler, that very reigns also. Indian maritime, they have also some impact and influence formation of the diaspora, the upper portion towards you. But the situation, that is what I was telling, that is predated European commercial interest. Onset of European advancement, if it is 19th, 20th century, just you look at two events, that is in colonial period, Indian situation and abroad situation. If it is Indian situation, poor agriculture system, poor economic system, calamities of Indian environment. In this situation, famine and poverty aggravated the situation more. People become unemployed. At the same time, Europe needs some laborers, lot of laborers due to abolition of the slave trade during 1834, during 1845, during 1874 in the colonies of Dutch, French or British. That very situation, India feels the need for the Europe to servitude of Indian people in the category of labor, soldier, dog workers, and like this. In two forms, you will be given with indentured and company form. Was the context of diaspora formation away from India in several foreign countries. People migrated to Fiji, Suriname, Caribbean, Trinidad, Natal, like those. What are the statistics? 25 million plus people across the 100 countries, even they for 40% of their population in those countries, that is Caribbean and Malaya, and from diaspora. That's another line. Everyone know what is the diaspora. Exactly. It's a melancholy word. That is, people alienated from their homeland to return their hostland. It's another experience that the writers say like this. It's totally happiness, totally lack of happiness, unhappiness, but in their own way. If 25 million people are diasporic, then you can collect narrative from 25 million. আমি বলতে চাইছিলাম 25 মিলিয়ন উপন্যাসের সৃষ্টি হতে পারে, ফিকশনের সৃষ্টি হতে পারে, নন ফিকশনের সৃষ্টি হতে পারে। এটা একটা খুব বিরাট বড় ব্যাপার। But what was the significance of diasporic studies in today's context? And what the writer want to communicate to the people from the diasporic representation? And what are the narratives are spoken of? Context I can share, but otherwise there is so much learned people have writers here. You will exchange those words. How the writers communicate? What is the significance of studying diaspora in this conference? I hope you are here. You will discuss. You will get some resolution and opinion from this conference, and you can throw a different light what already been written. Already been written. There are different short stories on cultural disintegration, dislocation, disjuncture, loss of alienation, cultural alienation, and towards destinations or towards alienation. I like those so much terms. Easy to say, but more rough and tough to endure with. When the people remain in homeland, but at the core of his heart, that very country where from he migrated is in his brain and heart. So endurance every day, every moment. But always he tries to adapt that very homeland, remaining his own land in his day. That adaptation, that being a consensus that now it may be my homeland as T.T. Umrigar is novel. It may be sweet like this now title. Professor Kumar, can you help me? What was the novel T.T. Umrigar? What he said, his communication was like this, that past history is mournable, but you can adapt this time. It was what the novel was. Now it be sweet. Now to be sweet. Now to be sweet. Like this. But he enlightened us that remaining diasporic, you can adapt it, thinking that it is my country and where I have been migrated, that was in my dream, that may be written or I can discover. আসলে বলতে চাইছিলাম যে ডায়াসপোরার দুটো ভাগ, একটা ছিল প্রথমের দিকে যেটা একটা পেইনফুল লাইফ ছিল যিনি প্রবাসে আছেন, আর এখন যারা 1960 onwards যাচ্ছে, they are successful, skilled and professional with dignified and self-respect. They can dominate while they are now. তারা এক্সিস্টিং কান্ট্রিতে যে ডমিনেট করেন তাদের সাকসেসে, তাদের ইকোনমিক স্ট্রাকচারে, তাদের সোশ্যাল লাইফে। সবথেকে বড় কথা, তারা একটা বড় এখন একটা মানে ভালো পরিবেশ হয়ে গেছে। দ্যাট ইজ অ্যাডভেন্ট অফ সায়েন্টিফিক অ্যারেঞ্জমেন্টস, ইন্টারনেট এন্ড ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়ালাইজেশন, ফাস্ট কমিউনিকেশন। যদি কেউ ওয়াশিংটনে আসেন, তিনি ভাবেন আমি তো ব্যাঙ্গালোরে আছি, সকাল সন্ধ্যে মা বাবার সাথে কথা হয়। So two system is now different. What was during Hungarian indenture, that is when we are writing Gilbert writers, and now those who are now writing in different developed first world countries. এইরকম আলোচনাগুলো এখানে হবে, আমার মনে হয় আমার থেকে আরো ভালো করবেন আপনারা যারা এই বিষয়ে করছেন। আমি সামান্য আপনাদের সাথে শেয়ার করলাম। I have to say something, but important or significant matter is that Manbhum Mahavidyalaya is arranging such a topic, such a conference, assembling so much people of different institutions. Really, a big hands for them. আরো একবার ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আমাকে এখানে বলতে পারার জন্য সুযোগ করে দেওয়ার জন্য। I wish this conference take that success.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much to our honorable Registrar Sir for his excellent exploration into the topic. So now, may I request our governing body's member, Sothinatha, so Mr. Sotinath Mahanti, to say a few words.
নমস্কার। আজকে যে ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সেমিনারের অনুষ্ঠানের আয়োজন করা হয়েছে, আমি প্রথমেই তাদের আয়োজক পুলিশকে এবং আমাদের ভারপ্রাপ্ত পাঠশাস্ত্রী মন্ডল মঞ্চে উপস্থিত আছেন আমাদের বিশেষ অতিথি, আমাদের সিন্ধু বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের রেজিস্ট্রার মহাশয়, আমাদের প্রফেসর ডক্টর কর মহাশয়, সম্মানীয় কলেজের অধ্যাপক মাননীয় অমিতাভবাবু, আর্থবাবু এবং আমার সামনে সম্মানীয় সমস্ত অধ্যাপক অধ্যাপিকা এবং বিশিষ্ট অতিথিবর্গ এবং আমার আন্তরিক স্নেহের ছাত্রছাত্রীরা উপস্থিতি যথাযোগ্য সম্মান এবং আন্তরিক ভালোবাসা জানাই। যে বিষয় সম্বন্ধে আজ এখানে সেমিনার, আমি হয়তো সেই বিষয় সম্বন্ধে কিছু বলার চেষ্টা নিশ্চয়ই রাখবো না। আমি শুধু চাইব এই সেমিনার যেটা হচ্ছে, যে উদ্দেশ্য নিয়ে হচ্ছে, এটা সাফল্য এবং আগামী দিনে আমাদের এই মানভূম মহাবিদ্যালয় যেন একটা নির্দিষ্ট জায়গা করে নিতে পারে এবং অনেক ভালো জায়গায় যেতে পারে, সেটাই কামনা করব। আমার পূর্ববর্তী বক্তা মাননীয় রেজিস্ট্রার মহাশয় খুব সুন্দর বললেন, আমি তো শুনছিলাম এবং এত সুন্দর বিষয় সম্বন্ধে আমার ধারণা ছিল না যে এত সুন্দর অনেক কিছু জানলাম, আমি সম্মুখ করলাম, খুব ভালো লেগেছে। উনি তো বলবেন, পরবর্তী যারা আছেন তারা আরো সুন্দর করে বলবেন বিষয় সম্বন্ধে এবং আজ অনুষ্ঠান চলতেই থাকবে, আমরা এটা শুনবো। আমি শুধু এই বলবো যে যে উদ্দেশ্য নিয়ে আমাদের এই প্রোগ্রামটা শুরু করা হয়েছে বা করা হচ্ছে, সেটা সাফল্য হোক এবং পুনরায় সকলকে ধন্যবাদ এবং যথাযোগ্য সম্মান, আন্তরিক প্রীতি, সদিচ্ছা, ভালোবাসা জানি। আমি নমস্কার।
Sotinath বাবুকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ। Now I request the Professor Mahavidyalaya to say few words.
প্রথমেই আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আমাদের আজকে 9 এবং 10 এই দিন ধরে যে সেমিনার কলেজে আয়োজন করেছে, সেই আয়োজনের তিনি তরফ দিয়ে গত 1 মাস ধরে চেষ্টা করে এই সেমিনারটাকে আজকে শুরু করেছেন ডক্টর পার্থসারথী মন্ডল মহাশয়কে, যিনি হেড অফ দ্য ডিপার্টমেন্ট ছিলেন এবং কলেজের ভারপ্রাপ্ত অধ্যক্ষ হিসেবে কাজ করছেন। আর এই মুহূর্তে স্টেজে উপস্থিত মঞ্চে উপস্থিত আমাদের রেজিস্ট্রার মহাশয় ডক্টর ব্যানার্জি এবং ডক্টর অংশুমান বর্ধমান বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে এই ডিপার্টমেন্ট উপস্থিত হয়েছেন। এই দুটোকে আমি আমার শ্রদ্ধা ও ভালোবাসা জানাচ্ছি এবং কিছুক্ষণ আগে আমাদের কৃষ্ণ মহাশয় এই আজকের বিষয় নিয়ে যে বক্তব্য রাখলেন বা যেগুলি আলোচনা করলেন কিন্তু কিছুই জানি না এবং এটা কতটা রেডিমেড এবং প্রায়োগিক সেটা কিছুটা বুঝতে পারলাম। বাকিটা এই 9-10 তারিখ ধরে আলোচনা চলবে, শুনবো এবং আরেকটা আলোকিত হবো এবং জানতে পারবো এই করছে আপনার সবাই। এবং আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আমার সভাপতি এবং ছাত্রদেরকে, যারা এখানে ছাত্রছাত্রী আজকে এবং যারা পার্টিসিপেন্ট যারা এসেছেন তাদের সবাইকে আমরা আন্তরিক শুভেচ্ছা ও ভালোবাসা জানাচ্ছি। এবং আজকে আমরা ইউজিসি কোনো স্পন্সরশিপ আজকের এই সেমিনারে পাইনি, তা সত্ত্বেও কলেজ এই ডিপার্টমেন্ট ইংলিশ ডিপার্টমেন্ট যেভাবে এই সেমিনারের আয়োজন করেছে তার জন্য সমগ্র ইংলিশ ডিপার্টমেন্টের ফ্যাকাল্টি মেম্বার্স এবং মাস্টারমশাইদেরকে আমি আমার অকুণ্ঠ ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। এবং বেশি কথা বলতে চাই না, আমি চাই এই সেমিনারটা করে চলবে এবং এই সেমিনারটা সাকসেস হোক, এই আশা করে আমি আমার বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। থ্যাংক ইউ।
So now we will move on to the next part of our program. That is the technical part of the program. The keynote address will be delivered by Professor Anshuman Kaur. Actually, Professor Kaur is a name and fame in the home and abroad. He has visited many countries: Australia, UK, America. From Voice of America, there was an interview. So he's a rare combination of a critic and scholar and poet. He has written many books, books, anthologies of poems, novels, drama plays, and the more than that, he is a product of Purulia district. So we feel proud of him. And he responded in a very, responded like my own sir or whatever. What should I say? I cannot express the way he responded and helped to materialize the seminar. So we are happy to have Professor Kaur here as a keynote speaker, and more than that. Today we have a program of a book launch written by Professor Kaur, that is the book is on Diaspora, and one announcement that you can collect the book. We have it here with us, few copies, and it will enlighten you a lot about the topic of the seminar. So, and another thing is that he was for a long time the head of the Department of English, Harvard University, and very popular teacher. He's and the moment we actually, circulate the player, many responded. Called me that you streamline this or that because we like to listen to Professor Kaur. So I think our students will be very happy and lucky to see him physically and hear him physically. So now I request Professor Kaur to deliver his keynote address.
Honorable Registrar, Central Government University, who we are all listening to with almost surprise. Whatever he has said has prepared the ground for my talk as well. Amita Ora, Gopinath Babu, my colleagues of this college and of other institutes, business scholars, and my dear students, and of course, Manbhum, whom I know for so many years. Thank you for all those nice words for me, Partha. But the point is that today I might not be able to, speak a lot on this topic for the students, because since it's an international conference and some of the delegates I know that who are very serious researchers in this area. So I like to talk of course, for the students, but mostly for the scholars to identify some of the areas which I think that they should consider in future for continuing research in diaspora studies. I'm really grateful to Professor Nachiketan. He is a man of biological science, and the way he has talked about diaspora, particularly India diaspora, that is something amazing. For this keynote address, I have decided to use a title, and the title, as I told you, that might be a bit tricky for the students because the title is the fourth phase in diaspora criticism, locating the minority in diaspora. Now, I'll be talking about a kind of what I call the fourth phase, and I'll be relating that to the discourse of minority studies as well. And of course, all these things I'll be doing within, I hope, 40 minutes or so. And because one of my friends from the University of Hyderabad, we are really fortunate to have him in your seminar, in your conference, rather, who is almost a kind of scholar in diaspora studies in India now. He'll be speaking, delivering his plenary talk, and his talk is scheduled at 12:45, but he probably will begin at 1. So I must stop before 1. So for 40 minutes is what I'm speaking. Now, what is the fourth phase that I am actually talking about, and how or why I am claiming that it should be related to what we call the minority discourse? Look, I'd like to begin by sharing with you two anecdotes. These are actually real life incidents. I should not call them stories because, with both of these stories, definitely I am connected. Long back in 2006, when I was in Australia enjoying a fellowship, I was traveling almost the entire country. And I was in Sydney, and my day's university was Sydney University, and from there I was going to another university for delivering a talk, and I had to hire a cab for that. And the cab driver was, of course, not Korean. After our journey it was, and on my way to that university, he asked me that from which part of South Asia are you? I told him that I am from India. And then we were sharing a lot of things. Usually I love to talk to the taxi drivers or the rickshaw pullers whenever I get some time. And after 5 minutes or so, he told me two things, of which one is very important for today's talk. And the first one is that he told me that, you know, that I hate India. So I asked him, why do you hate Indians? He told me because Buddha was born in India, but he were not able to understand the significance of Buddha. We have been able to understand who he is. So that's why I hate him all. So this is number one, which is not that important. The second thing that he told me is this, that is also something very interesting, that yes, by that time I told him that, look, we people who are from Asia, and he stopped me and he told me that, look, you are not an Asian. Remember that you are a South Asian, you are not an Asian at all. Then I asked him that, why are you emphasizing on this, that I am not an Asian and I am a South Asian? He told me that, how much have you traveled? I told him that not much really. By 2006 I was only in Oxford, and then that was my second trip abroad. And he told me that if you travel abroad, you understand that only people with Mongolian face, they are known as Asians outside Asia. You are South Asian and not an Asian. So this is something which is very interesting. I will try to focus on this a little later. Because remember that, as I was pointed out, that the North Korean taxi driver is also a diaspora in Australia. Because Australia is also not his homeland, but Australia is his hostland. So that is something which is very interesting, and I'd like to focus on this a little later. The second incident happened, I was in Delhi for 10 days for a confidential work just from the 8th to 5th of this month. And when I was going to Delhi on 28th, the man who sat next to me, he is from Katwa, Bengali Hindu. I like these two identities as well. And he was going to Delhi, and I asked him and all other people, because he looks like a laborer, and all other people they were a bit uncomfortable with that fellow because he was carrying a huge bag and could not manage that as well. And then I asked him that from where you are. He told me that I am from Katwa. Then I told him that I am from Adwa. Immediately we became friends, and I started talking to him. And he was going to Riyadh, Middle East. And he told me that his flight from Delhi was at 2 at midnight. And he told me that he was going to Riyadh he has been working there. He was in India for 6 months on a leave because his wife was a bit ill. And now he's going back to his place of work. And he told me that something that I know, of course I know, because that is also another very interesting thing, that from Purbo Bardhaman district, the district to which now I belong. By the way, I'm really fortunate to be back once again in the district where I spent 10 years almost, and Mahavidyalaya High School was my first workplace as well. I began my career as a school teacher in Mahavidyalaya High School. It's good to be back here. Anyway, so he told me that so many people, they are in the Middle East from the district of Purbo Bardhaman, and so many from Kandi region of Murshidabad. They all work in real estate as laborers. And I asked him a lot of questions, and he told me that these people are very nice, they give us good salary and everything. The only point is that you should work, like a laborer, and you should not be greedy, and you should not do anything that harms the sentiment of Islam. And the second important thing, that you should not at all try to make money in a good. If so, then they will cut off your hands. I asked him that, is it so? Have you seen anyone whose hands have been cut off? He told me that, no, I have not seen anyone, but they have told us that they have already threatened us by saying this. Now, these two stories are very important. As I told you, that these are two incidents, actually, not two stories rather. One in 2006, long back, that North Korea taxi driver who pointed out to me that I am not an Asian, but I am a South Asian. And the second one is that a man like him, so many people like him, they are now going to the Middle East, and here they are forming a kind of a diasporic community. And Sam was talking about, Sam was also basically talking about, the UK, the USA, Australia. So, but very few of us, we talk about the diaspora in the Middle East, or so many other regions as well. This is exactly why I'd like to situate my talk today. And Ajay Sahu is one of those rare scholars who have been working on the diaspora, the Indian diaspora in the Middle East, right? So these are the important things that I would like to request you to keep in mind while listening to the rest of my talk, right? Now, what about the fourth phase? I'll come back to these two stories to highlight that what I call the minority discourse and the emergence of the gradual formation of fourth phase in diaspora criticism. This is the book which is a very famous one, Diaspora Criticism, written by Suresh Misra. He's a man from Fiji. So I was talking about the Canadian Islands, and I'm not entering into that. Already you have been able to understand that Indian diaspora will be divided into a few phases, and there are a few contexts against which you can place all these phases, and also the literature produced by different kinds of Indian diaspora as well. This book is very important, Suresh Misra's book, because he talked about a few stages, 3 stages. My talk in a way is an extension of what Suresh Misra did in this book. He talked about 3 stages of diaspora criticism, and he has used a few phases for these 3 stages as well. If I just quote a little bit, then you'll be able to understand what exactly he was actually talking about. The first stage he identifies as the scene of dual territoriality. The second stage he identifies as the scene of situational laterality. And the third stage he identifies as the scene of archival specificity. Now, those of you who have worked in diaspora studies, they must be aware of these terms, but these 3 terms might be a bit difficult for the students to understand. To sum it up for the students and for the scholars who are not familiar with these
these three phases that Suresh Mishra has talked about. In the first phase, he was talking about that it was actually dual territoriality, meaning the diasporians, people who have migrated from their homeland to the host land for so many reasons. I mean, there was a time when, Sir has rightly pointed out, the diaspora was used as a very technical and specific term, and it meant only dispersion of a community under a culture. But nowadays, diaspora is used as kind of an umbrella term, and so many communities they claim themselves to be diasporic communities. But the point that Suresh Mishra was trying to make is this: that when in the first stage of diaspora criticism, we are studying particularly the literary and cultural representations of diaspora. We are looking at the kind of conflict that was there between the homeland and the hostland, the sense of belonging to the homeland and the fear of non-acceptance in the hostland and how to acculturate the hostland. Meaning that's why he has told that there's the phase of dual territoriality, meaning a diaspora was torn between two territories. One, technically speaking, the homeland, the land that he has or she has left behind, and the other, the hostland, the land that she or he is trying to acculturate into. The second one is the situation of what is the situation of laterality. What does it mean? That look, when we talk about dual territoriality, it involves a kind of a binary. Meaning, on the one hand is the homeland, on the other hand is the hostland. But now we know that there are people, particularly because of the hybridized identities, and if you think of the second generation diaspora, or the third generation diasporians, there's a Greek name is Roger Miller, who has written a very famous book, This for This, which is basically a study of the Indian diasporians in the UK. He has shown us that the second and the third generation diasporians, they are, as Sam was rightly pointing out, that they are more I should say, open to adaptations to the process of acculturations, and that's why he has used the term cultural navigators. He has called them the cultural navigators. Meaning whenever the time requires, the situation demands, they can switch over from an Indian identity to a British identity, or the vice versa, from a British identity to an Indian identity. That is something very easy for them, and that is why Suresh Mishra has talked about the situational laterality, which means that diasporic identity is no more torn between the identity of the homeland or the identity to the hostland, but it has become something isometric. Meaning so many other issues are there which you need to talk about, which you need to consider while analyzing the formation of a diasporic identity. So that is the second phase. The third phase is the situation of specificity, specific subjectivity. What does it mean? Let me just explain this once again for the students. Might be that it's a kind of a silly thing for the research scholars. But when we are talking about Indian diaspora, I don't think I am told that diaspora itself is an umbrella term, and within diaspora we talk about so many kinds of diaspora. But within Indian diaspora also, you should think that Indian diaspora is also a homogenized category. It is not. It is not. Rather, it is a heterogeneous, I should say, nomenclature. Right? Meaning, within Indian diaspora, we study, for instance, Bengali diaspora, we study, for instance, Punjabi diaspora, we study, for instance, sometimes Sikh diaspora, we study, for instance, Marwari diaspora, so many, different diasporic communities who create the Indian diaspora. Within Indian diaspora, so many times we also do study, religion has become something very important, Hindu diaspora or even Islamic diaspora, pan-Islamic diaspora or pan-Hindu diaspora. So my point is that now specificity has become, Suresh Mishra has argued that specificity has become something very important. Meaning earlier, that is what that Korean, North Korean taxi driver was pointing out to me, that you are not an Asian, but you are a South Asian. But once again, let me tell you that these are not mutually exclusive categories. Meaning, if I could be, at the same time, a member of Asian diasporic community, I could be a member of South Asian diasporic community, I could be a member of Indian diasporic community, I could be a member of even Bengali diasporic community. Meaning, as an individual, if I am a diasporian, I do have multiple affiliations. I hope that I am more or less clear to you. That is why which particular identity you are talking about, specifically that has become something which is very, very important. right? So this is something that we need to focus on, and we are actually focusing on this. We are for the last 10 or 15 years, we have been talking about this the specificities within diaspora studies, in a systemic way. And this is something that Sudesh Mishra has actually talked about. I hope that more or less, in a nutshell, I have been able to point out that what was basically Sudesh Mishra's theory about the 3 stages in diaspora studies. It began with the situational, dual territoriality, the situational laterality, and then subject specificities. And as I told you, that I might have an affiliation which actually is not a single affiliation but a product of multiple affiliations. As I told you, that I could be simultaneously a member of all these diaspora communities. If you look at different associations, for instance, either in the US or in the UK, you might find that there are associations for Asians, there are associations for South Asians, there are associations for Indians, there are associations for Bengalis as well. In fact, in 2018, I was invited to one such Bengali conference, which is basically an association of, once again, the Bengali diasporians of India. Because once again, that's why these are all overlapping categories. Because you can have Bengalis not only from India but from outside India. The largest number that we have actually is from, of course, Bangladesh. And the Bengali Association of Bangladesh is something different from the Bengali Association of India as well. So my point is that that's why Sudesh Mishra was talking about the subjective specificities. But in doing so, this is why I've told you that we should focus more on the notion of minority. In doing so, what has happened, a few other issues which have become very, very important, say in the last 10 years or so, those issues have become very, very important, and we need to shift our focus when we are talking about India diaspora in text and context. We should, shift our focus from, I would like to argue, from the subject specificity to the minority discourse. Now, what is meant by the minority discourse here? What is meant by the minority discourse? I'm using the term minority discourse by falling back upon John Muhammad and David Lloyd. I hope that you also are, some of you are familiar with the title of his book, The Nature and Context of Minority Discourse. Where I like to quote a little bit from that book, where they say that by minority discourse we mean a theoretical articulation of the political and cultural structures that connect different minority cultures in their subjugation and opposition to the dominant culture. So, two cultures, once again, they are creating a minority, dominant culture and a subjugated culture, right? But the question is that what is to be identified to be, or which one is the dominant culture in a multicultural country? Because remember that when we are talking about the context of diaspora, the sociological perspective of diaspora, then we should keep in mind that we are talking about basically multicultural countries. But that multiculturalism is also something different from the Indian multiculturalism. This is also something that we should keep in mind. Because that multiculturalism that now we are talking about while talking about Indian diaspora is a product of, as I was pointing out, the post-colonial migration of the Indians and of so many other diaspora communities to some of the well-known first world countries of the world, of the globe, for instance, the UK, the USA, Australia, Canada. These are the countries that basically we talk about whenever we talk about. In fact, in this seminar also, most of the papers will be on writers who belong to these countries. Either they are Indian diasporian in the UK, or they are the Indian diasporian in USA, or they are the Indian diasporian in Australia, or they are the Indian diasporian in Canada. So these are the countries which became multicultural, particularly after the Second World War in the 1950s and 1960s. Most of these countries, they started declaring themselves to be fully multicultural, adopting multicultural policies in the 1960s. And that is why, as I told you, that we need to keep in mind that these countries are countries of multiple cultures, and which of these multiple cultures is usually the dominant culture? Mostly in diaspora studies, the culture of the natives of those countries. For instance, if you're talking about the UK, then basically the culture of the English people, that is considered to be the dominant culture. And in opposition to the English culture, say for instance, if I am from India, then the Indian culture is the subjugated culture. So this is how the majority-minority wider is actually created. The same is true about America. The same is true about Australia as well. So the native culture, basically, that is what is actually talked about. In this context, now I come to my point or my argument that I would like to offer in this keynote, as I told you that it's like the fourth phase. I'd like to call that we have reached to a stage where we should talk about the minority in diaspora studies, and that would be the fourth phase of diaspora. And once again, by saying this, I'd like to dismantle the notion of the minority majority as it is traditionally seen or conceived of as well, because that is also something which is very important. And I'm not really right diaspora, even the minority in diaspora, Indian diaspora to be more specific, we need to focus on these issues from two perspectives. One is the sociological perspective, and the other mostly the literary perspective, but to some extent we can call it the literary cultural perspective as well. Now, properly till date, not at all, because we are talking about subjective specificities a lot, as this was pointed out, but we are not talking about these minority relationships at all. And here, as I told you already, that I would like to begin with when we talk about the sociological perspective and what the areas that we need to identify and walk more through the space. As I told you, that this is a concept that was offered by Dr. Brown back in 1996, but has not been able to get much attention from the critics or has been overlooked by the critics. But this is something which is very, very important. Why very, very important? Because Dr. Brown was arguing, and it's a very simple thing. Dr. Brown was arguing that after the 1960s, the way Dutch countries, UK, USA, Australia, Canada, in search of future, making future, that the socio-political, cultural fabric of each of these countries has got transformed, and heavily has got transformed. For instance, a few days ago, we had an India as the first Indian Prime Minister of the India, something which was unthinkable, say, some 30 years back. It has become possible because of migration. It has become possible because the UK has opened itself as a multicultural country and accommodated all these migrants. But the point, which is something very, very important, is this: that in diaspora studies, those of you who are from literature departments, they know that whenever we analyze the problems of culture, for instance, if you read Jumbalari, then we'll find that if you read, for instance, the namesake, or if you read, for instance, even the lowland, you'll find that in namesake, Oshima, how difficult it is for Oshima to acculturate that host land. Those lands also need to adjust themselves to the upcoming cultures as well. Cultures of different kinds. For instance, in accepting Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister, the white British citizens need to reorient themselves as well. That okay, it's a man of color, but he's our Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister. This is something which is very important. The focus has shifted, meaning the purity of the British culture. Remember that when British was talking about the dual territoriality. On the one hand, if we talk about Indian British diaspora, on the one hand was the Indian culture, on the other hand was the British culture. The point is, how pure is the British culture anymore? What is now that to be called a pure English culture? If you go to UK, I think there are twice, you find that almost in all the major cities and in London, almost in every street there is only at least one Indian restaurant. Indian cuisine has become very much a part of the British cuisine. Very much. So is the English identity anymore a kind of a pure identity? Or is the English identity is also something hybridized? So that what does the binary exist? This is something that Rao was trying to argue. And then Rao made a very significant point that that's why she said that I want to promote the notion of diaspora space. Because in diaspora space, the native is as alien, as much alien as the diasporian. Which means, think of a UK university, of the English department, 6 faculty members. Out of 6, 3 are British. one from Nigeria, one from Australia, one from India. So the three pure British colleagues also always need to keep in mind that I should not make a racist remark at all, because one Indian is my colleague and one Nigerian is my colleague. They also become a minority in that space sometimes. But we don't talk about their minority status. We always keep on talking about the minority status of the Indians there. That is no more the case. That has been no more the case. For instance, if you think in terms of power relationship, Rishi Sunak is the minority, a representative of minority, but so far as the power equation is concerned. So who is the minority there in the power equation? So the traditional notion of minority goes should undergo. Here are something that I am proposing very simple, and move out of that to map out the new developments and to situate them in proper perspective as well. And this is something which is very, very important, and we should think about that, talk about that more and more. Number one. Number two. Yes, so I was talking about the more of these, most of these diasporas are successful. Believe me, I have seen so many of the Indian diasporas welcome the Indian diaspora. Why? There have been books titled Development and Indian Diaspora. Why? Because Indian diaspora is considered an asset to the development of India. Why? Because they can bring in money. And that's why in my book, which will be inaugurated today, I have interviewed one fellow, Amit Mishra, who is a professor now in Ambedkar University. He was asked to undertake a project just to map out how many people are going out from India and how many people are coming in and what's the money involved there, how much money is involved. Because money becomes important, and that's why now I don't know whether you are aware of this, that Indian government long back has declared to make one day specific for the diaspora, that is celebrated as Indian Prawashi Divas, Bharatiya Prawashi Divas. So why the Indian diaspora is so important to India now? Because of the investment, foreign direct investment, because of money. But this is about the diaspora, Indian diaspora, that is an asset to the country. What about the diaspora that is liability? What about the diaspora that is liability? Think of that level. I told you that within the plane, everybody was looking down upon him, right? Uncomfortable with him, because they are a liability. I don't know whether you are aware of this or not. A few months ago, from the Middle East, so many Indians were laborers. Most of them are laborers, students as well, were brought back to India as well. Till the war also. That is the diaspora which is liability, which is not an asset. If you go to any of these so-called multicultural countries, definitely people who are skilled, they are successful. But at the same time, I have seen students, I have seen even research scholars who went there, didn't want to come back, could not get a career, and ultimately has become a taxi driver. You go to New York, in New York, out of 10, I have met 8 taxi drivers who were Indians. What about that? It's not about a diaspora that will give you money. It's a diaspora which is liability to you. It's a diaspora that is liability. Indian government is absolutely silent on them. They have a mind by the present. Only there is one novel which is written by Kiran Desai. There, this class issue becomes important. Otherwise, I'm talking about now, I hope you have been able to understand the issue of class. The inflection class matters a lot in Indian diaspora so far as the sociological perspective is concerned, but seldom are we talking about that. Neither the critics or the academicians. No, Ajaya is an exception. I told you that he's sincerely working on the laborers who are working in the Middle East, who are not an asset, but a liability to Indian diaspora. But they are also contributing to Indian diaspora in their own ways. And as I told you, that if you think of the big countries, the big first world multicultural countries, we are not talking about them at all. Literary representations, socio-cultural representations, absolutely are silent on these issues. I must now that we should talk about them, more about them. Because as I told you that the majority minority, that binary, this is undergoing sea changes. And also, in that context, religion becomes important. Why? Absolutely significant, so far as Indian diaspora is considered. And the Muslims are gradually, I'm telling this you on the basis of up to sociological surveys that I have undergone. And also I can refer to a few incidents that you must have heard of. 2 months back, there was a match played in Dubai between India and Pakistan. After that, in Leicester, which is a multicultural city of the UK, a riot broke out between the Hindus and the Muslims. Why? Because the Hindus, attacked the Muslims who were, some of them supposedly were shouting slogans in favor of Pakistan. But they are Indians, all of them are Indians. The riot went to that extent that ultimately the police had to intervene. So many people were arrested. This fellow, Rishi Sunak, so many times we are very proud of that man. That look, and India, this is revenge on the colonizers. It's not. Believe me, it's not. Why? Just 15 days back, or might be 7 or 8 days back, I wrote an article in Outlook on Rishi Sunak, and there, the title of my piece was that we should give only 1 cheer for Rishi Sunak and not 3 cheers. I am sure that those of you who are students of English literature, they know that long back Ian Foster wrote one piece in a humorous and ironic way. He said that 2 cheers for democracy. Usually give 3 cheers to welcome something, and he said that democracy is good, but we can give only 2 cheers for democracy. We should move on 1 cheer for some of the faults which democracy actually has. I have written that we should give only 1 cheer for Rishi Sunak, and we should keep 2 cheers out of our appreciation of Rishi Sunak. Why? Because he's a follower of Margaret Thatcher. Because he's out and out a follower of Hinduism. I don't know whether you are aware of this. He has been seen worshipping Go Mata and declaring himself to be a very proud Hindu. Let me tell you that after the riot in Leicester also, the Indian embassy gave a statement in which all the Hindus and Muslims attacked each other, but only the attack on the Hindus, only those attacks were condemned by the Indian embassy, which is very unfortunate. After Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister, the Indian Muslims and the Muslims of other countries in the UK, they are afraid of the future. And he has said that my idol is Margaret Thatcher. Who was Margaret Thatcher? A supporter of racism in England. I hope you know that. If you go to US, if you go to Australia, that 90% of the papers which will be presented in these conference will be on writers who belong to these countries. What about the writers of Malaysia? Indian writers. Significant number of novels and poems and plays are written by the Indians who are in Malaysia. We don't know about them because they don't sell in the market. Caribbean people talk about our watch, of course, because it also has a market. What about Singapore? What about Dubai? We don't know about them. So another minority. While mapping your future research, I told you that it's basically a talk for research scholars. Think about these writers. Not only that, if you again think about writers, you will find that mostly we also think of American writers, Indian American writers. We keep on working on only on Dupalai, Vidal Desai, big names, Chitra Banerjee, Diwar Gandhi, all of them have back prizes, awards, right? What about my friend who will be reading out his words in this seminar tomorrow, Qasim Ali? What about him? Have you read him at all? He is a very important voice. After the context of 9/11, if we analyze, the literature produced by the Indian diaspora, most of the big shots they are cited on the racist attacks on the Indians in the USA. So many of them were attacked. So many of them. At least one film you must have seen, and that is My Name Is Khan, which is a clear document of how the Indians were, humiliated, tortured, psychologically and physically, sometimes even in the US, simply because they were considered to be terrorists. And if you are a Muslim,